And it's a big Wednesday for us as well. President Trump touching down in China after taking aim at North Korea. The president using the first major speech of his Asia trip to issue this warning to Kim Jong-un: do not try us. Hello and welcome to Happening Now. I'm Jon Scott.
He was serious about that.
Yeah, he sounded a little stern, didn't he?
Yeah, that was quite a speech and quite a comment. I'm Melissa Francis. The president is in Beijing on a big political day back home. Democrats putting some much needed points on the board, handily winning 2 governor's races. Phil Murphy defeating Kim Giordano. Wait, I can't say her last name. Thank you, guys. In New Jersey, well, she lost. Oh, there you go. And in the swing state of Virginia, Ralph Northam was beating Ed Gillespie by a wide margin there. We thought that one might be closer in the last hours. Some are calling this a referendum on President Trump and his rhetoric.
We need to close the wounds that divide and bring unity to Virginia. Whether you voted for me or not, we are all Virginians, and I hope to earn your confidence and support as we move forward.
Tonight, we declare the days of division are over. We will move forward together. This is exactly who we are, New Jersey. We have each other's backs. To believe in each of us is to believe in all of us.
Let's bring in Jake Sherman, senior writer for Politico and co-author of Politico's Playbook. The turnout in Virginia was surprisingly high. Is that what provided Democrats the key here?
Well, getting more votes is always a good thing if you want to win. Yes. But I'm finding the analysis of these races to be interesting. You can't make grand pronouncements about the national political mood based on a couple races in a couple states. I will concede that. But in 2009, when Republicans won in New Jersey and Virginia, it was widely accepted that that was a commentary, a reaction to President Obama after his first few months of governing. So I think we can make a similar statement about these 2 races in Virginia and New Jersey. And more concerning for Republicans and Republicans that I've spoken to over the last couple hours is in places like Henrico County, Virginia, which is the wealthy suburbs around Richmond, along a Republican stronghold of where Eric Cantor was from, and Dave Bratt of Virginia went Democratic in both the state house and the county level. So this should be concerning to Republicans. If Republicans don't want to be concerned, that's their own issue. But most analysts that I've spoken to this morning say this could be problematic.
Is this a repudiation of President Trump?
I don't know if it's a repudiation. I think you can't ignore some fundamental realities. The president's approval ratings across the board are not great. But listen, it's a long way until 2018. We're a year away from the midterm elections, and we'll see the impact of the president. And if the Republicans could get tax reform through, if they could repeal the health care law, if they could do an infrastructure bill, that they believe those are good things for their prospects in 2018.
We have some polling information out from Virginia about what people were thinking as they went to the polls here. I want to put these numbers up on the screen for you. When people were asked how they're feeling about how President Trump is working, President Trump gets 9% of them excited, 27% say optimistic, pretty much an equal number, 28% say scared, concerned, and the biggest number overall, 34% is scared. If you're feeling that way about your president nationwide, well, these are Virginia numbers, but doesn't bode well for his political coattails, I suppose.
No, it probably doesn't. I mean, listen, midterm elections are automatically harder for the president's party, as we saw in 2010 when Republicans swept through and got the majority in the House. But I think those numbers would be troubling to the White House. I haven't spoken to them. They are in China. But those do mirror the kind of 30% approval ratings that President Trump has nationwide. And listen, with all caveats, right, the polling was not incredibly accurate last time around, so we have to view polling skeptically at times. But if I were the White House, and many Republicans up here are concerned, and they want to seek to localize congressional races and focus on the member of Congress and not the president.
Democrats have had something of a circular firing squad going on in their party in recent days with the Donna Brazile book and the accusations about the Clinton campaign. But Republicans are going to have to do some soul searching as well, because although President Trump carries the GOP banner, he is his own peculiar kind of Republican. And I suppose there are going to be a lot of the, Jeff Flakes type on Capitol Hill who are going to be wondering, do you endorse this president even more and go with his agenda, or do you battle him some?
To addressing those two thoughts, number one, Democrats are still talking about 2016, which is not something they want to be talking about in almost 2018. Number two, Republicans have long been comforted because their internal polling shows that they view President Trump as his own entity and Republicans as their own entity, meaning the Trump brand is not the Republican brand. That's what the internal party polling has shown so far. We'll see if there's bleed, and this election result would seem to indicate that there's bleed. But I just want to make another couple points. The Manchester, New Hampshire mayoral race went to a Democrat for the first time in 14 years, highest turnout in a decade. Maine voted to expand Medicare with 59% of the vote. Those are two harbingers that would not appear to be good signs for Republicans.
Hard to believe it was 1 year ago today that we voted.
Moves quickly, right?
Yeah. Things have changed a lot in a year since President Trump was voted into office. Jake Sherman from Politico. Good to have you on, Jake. Thanks. Another Democratic victory to tell you about in Virginia last night, making history. Danica Roem set to become the first openly transgender person elected and seated in a U.S. state legislature after winning one of this year's most high-profile races.
I am a transgender woman. We won because I am a transgender woman, because I am a reporter, because I am a lifelong resident of Manassas, because of my inherent identifiers, not despite them. I never ran away from them. I championed them. And because of that, Prince William County is now more inclusive than it was before this election.
Roem unseated Republican delegate Bob Marshall in last night's election in Virginia. He once described himself as the, quote, chief homophobe, and sponsored a bill earlier this year that would have restricted which bathrooms Roem and other transgender people could use.
So right now, China is rolling out the red carpet for President Trump, the honor guard greeting the president and the first lady at the airport in Beijing. The visit is expected to focus on trade as well as tensions with North Korea. The president addressed the nuclear standoff in his speech before South Korea's National Assembly, calling for a unified front against the regime.
The world cannot tolerate the menace of a rogue regime that threatens with nuclear devastation. All responsible nations must join forces to isolate the brutal regime of North Korea, to deny it, and any form of it, you cannot support, you cannot supply, you cannot accept.
White House correspondent Kevin Corke is reporting live from Beijing right now. Kevin, that was quite a speech.
Boy, it certainly was, Melissa. I have to tell you, a lot of people watching that speech very carefully, and you had to come away feeling like the president certainly came across in a very strong, confident, and direct way. Now, it is against a backdrop here in China, against rising tensions with North Korea, to say nothing of a percolating possible trade war between the U.S. and China, that the president makes his way to Beijing with a lot on his plate. He wants to deliver on a promise, but also maybe even get a bit of help from the government here in China. We'll get to the help in just a moment, but first, as we share pictures of the president's arrival yesterday at the airport, we're going to talk about delivering on the promise. As you know, he has long said he wants to do all he can to level the playing field on trade between the world's two largest economies. That means getting China to open up more markets, lower trade barriers, and decrease that massive, nearly $250 billion trade gap currently in China's favor. So that will be at the top of the agenda, as well as, of course, North Korea. And that takes us to the helping hand part. As the first families enjoyed that tour of the Forbidden City and an historic private gathering, the president, in his conversations, certainly moving forward, will implore President Xi to give the U.S. a hand in trying to rein in the renegade regime in North Korea by applying economic pressure and living up to UN sanctions on Pyongyang. By the way, that's a theme he carried with him from South Korea, where he addressed their National Assembly and, in effect, Kim Jong-un.
The regime has interpreted America's past restraint as weakness. This would be a fatal miscalculation. This is a very different administration than the United States has had in the past.
Plain and simple talk there from the President of the United States. By the way, also while in South Korea, Mr. Trump attempted to go to the DMZ. However, bad weather and a little fog forced the White House to scrub what would have been a pretty auspicious and surprising trip. Don't forget, Melissa, tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, the President will take part in the welcoming ceremony. That's 9 o'clock in the morning local time. Then, of course, a full day of meetings. I'll be here for you and have all the details. But for now, back to you.
Quite a trip. All right, Kevin Cork, thank you.
Meantime, the vice president is busy as well. In a little more than an hour, Vice President Mike Pence will depart for Sutherland Springs, Texas. He'll attend a prayer service for the victims of the church massacre there. While we are learning that the man who gunned down 26 people during church services once escaped from a mental health facility. Brian Yennis is on that story. He's live from Sutherland Springs with more. Brian?
John, this morning it's about the red flags, the warning signs, the missed opportunities, raising further questions as to why the Air Force did not report this guy's criminal record, which now includes sexual assault allegations as well as an involuntary commitment to a mental health institution. Of course, this could have prevented him from purchasing legal weapons in those stores and perhaps maybe had prevented this massacre. Now, this, as the Comal County Sheriff says, they're looking into whether they mishandled a 2013 sexual assault investigation in which the gunman was a rape suspect. They investigated the case for 3 months but stopped after it was believed the gunman moved to Colorado. 4 women have come forward publicly in interviews with MySanAntonio.com yesterday, claiming the gunman sexually abused them in the past. Now, according to an El Paso police report, we now know the gunman escaped from a mental health facility in New Mexico in June 2012 while he was under pretrial confinement for a court-martial in which he was later convicted of assaulting his wife and stepson. The gunman was considered, quote, a danger to himself and to others when police caught him after the escape from that facility at a local bus terminal. We also now know the gunman was caught trying to bring guns onto the Air Force base, and he made death threats against his military superiors. The new revelations are raising those further questions. And meanwhile, new video from one of the Good Samaritans that chased the gunman in his vehicle. The video from his cell phone shows the gunman's SUV crashed off the roadway, police with weapons drawn, the gunman shooting himself in that vehicle after being wounded twice. This afternoon, Vice President Mike Pence will be visiting here. We expect him to go to the Brooke Army Medical Center to visit 7 of the wounded victims who are there. He will also get a debriefing from local law enforcement as well as go to a vigil at a local high school set for later tonight. The Vice President spoke to our Shannon Bream last night on Fox News at night, and this is what he said about the power of prayer during this difficult time.
I'm a believer, and I believe in prayer. And I know that at this moment of such heartbreak and loss in that community, that what most Americans are most able to do is to pray for those families.
And John, all the victims' names are expected to be released today.
As you say, the warning signs that were missed. And what a terrible part of this story. Brian Yennis. Brian, thank you.
A political setback for the GOP last night as House Republicans work to pass a tax bill next week. What the big loss in Virginia could mean for the president's agenda and next year's midterms. We'll talk to former White House Press Secretary Ari Fleischer. There he is. He's up next.
A Fox News alert, lawmakers now weighing in on two key races last night. Voters in Virginia and New Jersey choosing Democratic governors in Ralph Northam and Phil Murphy. President Trump tweeting about Northam's opponent, saying last night, quote, "Ed Gillespie worked hard but did not embrace me or what I stand for." Don't forget, Republicans won 4 out of 4 House seats, and with the economy doing record numbers, we will continue to win even bigger than before. Let's talk about it with Ari Fleischer, former press secretary to President George W. Bush, also a Fox News contributor. So, Ari, your Republican Party took a pretty good thumping last night. How worried are you?
Well, I'm worried. Look, it's been a very good 8 years for Republicans across the gubernatorial level, state legislative level, congressional and Senate level. Great 8 years and a very bad last night. I think you have to be a little bit guarded about how much you interpret last night in 2 states, basically, where you had races, several local races throughout the country, into what it can mean nationally. But no question, Democrats came out in huge numbers yesterday in the races that did count. And if they have that kind of enthusiasm going into 2018, it's going to be very tough sailing for Republicans.
Michael Steele, the former chairman of the GOP, said that Republicans have to get more accomplished, have to put more on the table so that they can point to their accomplishments and not get bogged down in people's thoughts about the president's Twitter account. Do you agree?
Exactly. Listen, if you're a congressional Republican and you're worried about what happened last night for your reelection, the number one thing you need to do is pass laws. Do your job. Because if they don't do anything, they will be defined by Donald Trump's tweets and Donald Trump's personality and Donald Trump's tenure, not their own. So if you want to take matters into your own hand and control your own fortune, your own future as a member of Congress, then do your job, pass tax reform, get that done, try to come back to repeal Obamacare. I would love to still see comprehensive immigration reform done. Those are the things that people expect Congress to do, and if they do that, Congress's approval numbers will go up, individual congressmen's numbers will go up. That's called governing, and that's what they need to do.
What do you think about President Trump suggesting that Ed Gillespie did not endorse him enough or didn't follow the Trump plan?
Look, I think both parties are going to go through a very unsettled period for the next at least one election, probably 2. I think some Republicans are going to run full core Donald Trump style races. Others are going to do what Ed did and try to thread the needle. And I think you'll see a third group that's going to totally reject Donald Trump and try to run as Republicans who are not for Donald Trump. On the Democrat side, you're going to see a similar fissure. It's going to be really the left-wing Democrats, the Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren wing, against a more moderate wing of the Democratic Party. Both parties are under tremendous strains, and there is no one way to define either party right now.
So much is being focused on this Virginia race, but it did not turn out to be as close as the polls suggested that it would be. Over the weekend, the Real Clear Politics average was about 2 points. It was almost 10 between the Republican and the Democratic candidate. What does that say to you?
Well, this should be a massive blinking red light for Republicans. And every time I hear a Republican say, but the polls got Donald Trump numbers wrong last time, so probably he's doing stronger than you think. Maybe he's doing a lot weaker than the polls show this time, as we saw in the Republican race. So Republicans need to wake up from last night's results and take a look and say, if we have a very unpopular president at the top, which by all historical measurements Republicans do, what can be done about it? And that means do their jobs, pass laws. For the president, I think the lesson for him is he needs to increase his popularity. He should not just dismiss the polls as saying the polls were wrong before. It's a real warning sign. If the president is popular, his party will be more popular, and he'll have a much more leverage to pass laws, get Congress to do what he wants.
Well,
those are the things that Republicans need to focus on after last night.
Republicans are rolling out that big tax reform bill on Capitol Hill. We'll see where that goes from here and whether there are any lessons from the elections in it. Ari Fleischer, all right, good to have you on. Thank you.
Very sad day for sports fans after star pitcher Roy Halladay died in a small plane crash off the coast of Florida.
It's the end of an era as United Airlines bids farewell to the Boeing 747. The jetliner going on one last flight from San Francisco to Honolulu. Crews draped the aircraft with a Hawaiian lei on the tarmac. The trip was a recreation of the plane's inaugural voyage back in 1970, when it was seen as a groundbreaker in commercial aviation. The first model had a spiral staircase up to first class. It also held twice as many passengers as its predecessors, earning it the nickname the Queen of the Skies.
It really opened up flying and the world to so many people because of its size and capacity. I think that's what so many people remember about it, because it was a lot of people's first experience of going to a really faraway place with their families.
The ship's retirement leaves Delta as the only U.S. airline still flying the 747, but Delta also will phase out the jumbo jet next year.
A sad morning for Major League Baseball. Retired all-star pitcher Roy Halladay has died in a plane crash at the age of just 40. The two-time Cy Young Award winner was killed when his single-engine plane crashed in the Gulf of Mexico off the Florida coast. These are live pictures of the scene. The Pasco County Sheriff's Office says Halladay was a personal friend of the department.
Roy, I can say he was one in a million. It is a true loss for us. I have no doubt he is looking down with God up in heaven, because his heart was a heart of gold. He was an unbelievable human being.
Phil Keating joins us live now from Miami. Phil.
Melissa, the National Transportation Safety Board is now on the scene, as we just saw. They are now leading this investigation, trying to ultimately determine what possibly caused Hallandale's plane to crash. One clue could be one of Hallandale's own tweets of recent times, where he said he loved flying this plane low, fast, and right over the water because it made him feel like a fighter jet pilot. That plane, when it's not seen under the water, is one of these, a Icon A5, and this is out of Icon's promotion video. The two-seater amphibious plane is small and tight, flies like a race car, and Icon delivered Hallandale's plane just last month. This is him with it, and he had a passion for flying it, posting multiple pictures and videos of him in it. Now, as a pitcher, he became just the 20th person in Major League history to pitch a perfect game, retiring all 27 of the opposing batters, and he was an 8-time All-Star. He played for the Toronto Blue Jays and then the Philadelphia Phillies, and everyone who knew and played with Halladay has nothing but the utmost of compliments.
Humility, he was a soft-spoken man, was combined with just this incredible work ethic, and I think those are the characteristics that made him a leader.
A lot of us grew up watching Roy Halladay play. I was fortunate enough to be able to sit in the dugout and share a locker with him for some of the best years I've had.
In the past hour, the Phillies organization just tweeted out this photo outside of the stadium in Philly of the memorial that is now growing in Hallanday's honor. His plane crashed just after noon yesterday in shallow Gulf of Mexico waters, not far from where Halladay retired northwest of Tampa. The sheriff says there was no Mayday call and that the ace pitcher was flying alone. Roy Halladay leaves behind a wife and 2 children, and it is said that he is very likely to be a future Baseball Hall of Famer. And Alyssa.
What a sad story. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
After winning the Cy Young in 2 different leagues, you can bet he'll be in the Hall of Fame. House Republicans on Capitol Hill finishing last-minute tweaks to their tax bill. They're aiming for a vote on the House floor next week. A live report from Washington on that. Plus, what last night's election results could mean for the rest of President Trump's agenda. House Republicans finishing markups on their tax reform bill as they push for a vote next week, while Vice President Mike Pence pitched tax reform in Indianapolis yesterday.
We need to cut taxes for the middle class in this country. We need to cut taxes on businesses so that American companies can be more competitive and be able to bring dollars back to this country to create jobs here. And we need to simplify the tax code.
Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live from Capitol Hill with the latest. Mike.
Well, John, good morning. The message from House Republican leaders is the stakes are high and they must deliver on taxes. House Speaker Paul Ryan spoke earlier about the impact of last night's elections on tax reform.
If anything, this just puts more pressure on making sure we follow through. That's the way what I take out of it.
Great.
More pressure. I adore Ed Gillespie. I feel bad that he lost. But I think it simply means we got to deliver.
This is day 3 of the House Ways and Means Committee's work on the Republican tax reform plan. This session is expected to go until late night tonight. Chairman Kevin Brady wants the tax reform package approved by Ways and Means tomorrow. One line of attack from Democrats today is blasting a proposal to eliminate the medical expense deduction while scrapping the estate tax, which they argue benefits the wealthiest Americans. New York Democrat Congressman Joe Crowley is trying to turn up the pressure on Republicans, warning they better get tax reform done or else they will not return as the majority party in the House. Crowley suggests this issue could have a huge impact on the 2018 midterms. A key Senate Democrat says after last night's elections, perhaps there will be a willingness to negotiate on tax reform.
The last 18 hours, Senate Democrats told the administration and the president that tax reform can be bipartisan if you focus on the middle class. And that's what voters demanded last night.
Democrats hoping they will have some leverage after last night. Republican leaders are hoping their members will feel more pressure than ever to get this done. John?
And Mike Emanuel. Mike, thank you.
Sure.
So exit polls indicating what may have helped Democrats win governor races in Virginia and New Jersey last night. A Fox News exit poll analysis shows that health care was the second most important issue to Virginia voters right after the economy. And an NBC News exit poll said 37% cited health care as a big priority for them. David Avella is chairman of GoPax. Simon Rosenberg is president and founder of progressive think tank NDN and a former advisor to the Bill Clinton campaign. Gentlemen, thanks to both of you for joining us. David, I can't help noticing number one on that list was the economy. And the thing that's going to make a difference in the economy is tax reform. I mean, they must really feel the pressure today. What do you think?
Any Republican who sits in a district with more than 2 traffic lights has to figure out how they get to yes on tax cuts, because in 3 months, 95% of voters aren't going to remember who the governors of New Jersey and Virginia are, but they are going to know where their member of Congress was on whether taxes got cut or not.
So, Simon, I'm imagining that Democrats smell blood in the water. This tax deal is right there on the table. What is one thing that you think you could change about this bill that would make it more palatable to Democrats?
I don't think that's the issue, Melissa. I think
No, wait,
Melissa,
we're not going to do talking points.
No, we're not.
What's one thing?
It's not talking points. I actually understand what they're proposing, and I don't think the Democrats are going to support a bill that dramatically cuts taxes for very wealthy people,
so
drives up the deficit. I'm going to finish. May I finish?
Well, you're doing talking points.
No, I'm not doing. It's insulting that you say that to me as if I don't actually understand what I'm saying and can do my own analysis about the economy.
But
Melissa,
you're not
please.
answering the question.
No, I am answering the question, which is Democrats are not going to support tax reform that dramatically cuts taxes on people that don't need tax cuts and prevents middle-class people from sharing in the benefits of these tax cuts while driving up the deficit. We're never going to support that framework. So if they want to move, as Senator Wyden said, to a bipartisan approach, right, we are very open to staying focused on the middle class and not driving up the deficit.
Okay.
That's what the Democrats want to do.
Melissa,
so David,
here's how you get...
Hang on. Okay, so after that speech, if we want to drill down on the actual details and try and make some progress, the nut of what he just said is the overall argument. So if you're trying to actually get something done, the first thing you might strip away, maybe it's that death tax, taking that off the table, putting it back, saying we're going to leave the death tax alone. Maybe that would get more Democrats, not Simon, who's not willing to come to the table at all, but real Democrats to the table.
Here's
what gets Democrats to the table. Republicans getting to 51 votes. And then all of a sudden 6 or 7 Democrats are all of a sudden going to be for tax reform. Democrats are not going to help pass tax cuts unless Republicans get it across the line, and it's already going to vote for it. Democrats think that if they stop tax cuts, they can put Republicans in a bad spot going into the elections. Democrats aren't going to do one thing to pass tax cuts. If we're going to get tax cuts for the American people, it's going to be because the Republican majorities deliver it.
Simon, do you want to prove him right? Are you guys not going to do one thing to pass tax cuts? I mean, I asked you for one thing. Do you want to give me one thing?
No, I think, Melissa, you know, I've come on this show with you many times. You do the same thing over and over again.
No, I don't. I just want you to answer the question I asked.
I'm not answering the question. I'm answering the question.
I know you're not answering the question. That's the problem.
So the point is that Democrats are not going to agree to a tax cut plan that overwhelmingly benefits wealthy people.
You already said that.
Drives up the deficit.
You already
right,
said
but that's
that.
what's being proposed. But that's what's being proposed. So we're not going to support it.
Repeating yourself isn't helping the argument. I'm asking you, like we're asking everyone, to come to the table and try and offer something productive.
Right,
Give
so
me
the
three
productive-
things you want to strip away.
the productive
maybe
answer-
it's the
the
estate tax. Maybe it's SALT. I mean, tell me what you don't like about this.
We
Can you be
reject the
specific?
entire. Melissa, I just told you, right, that we reject the frame that is being proposed here. We do not agree
So
that
you
this
don't
is
want to
going
work
to
at
be
all.
good
There's
for growth.
literally
No,
nothing
we
in there
don't
that's
agree.
decent.
We don't agree with the frame of the deal. What Senator Wyden said is what is the Democratic position, is that if the Republicans want to come to the table and work with us on tax cuts that actually really benefit middle-class people and don't drive up the deficit, we're game to do it, right? We've done it before.
So, the
party's done it
tax
before,
cuts that are
and
in
we're happy
there
to do it
for
again.
the middle class, doubling the standard deduction, all the things
Right.
that are in there, you don't like any of that would help working people, Simon.
You understand, right, based on the analysis, 'cause I know you went to Harvard and studied economics, that in fact, over time, a majority of middle-class people will be paying more in taxes rather than less.
No,
and so we
I don't accept that math.
Well, but
because
that's
it's
actually
static
been proven.
analysis,
Yeah.
and I don't accept static analysis. I only
Yeah.
agree with dynamic analysis because when you cut, the economy is
you.
going to grow. And I know
Good
you
for
don't
you.
believe that.
I know.
Melissa, Melissa,
Go ahead.
Democrats.
Instead of us fighting, let's let David finish. David, go ahead.
Yeah, sure.
Democrats could start by actually being for things they've been for in the past. Ron Wyden and Senator Crapo have actually put a framework not a lot different than what the current Republican bill in the Senate is talking about. So Democrats could actually be for things they've been for in the past, and they could then get on the board for tax cuts. But right now, this is in to honor Roy Halladay. Republicans have the ball in their hand. We got to start throwing strikes. If we start throwing strikes, one, the economy is going to continue to improve for Americans, and two, we're going to be rewarded on Election Day in 2018.
All right, gentlemen. Let's leave it there. You know, Simon, you and I are going to have to get a drink sometime. We can't show up and fight like this all the time.
Melissa, don't worry. I'm never coming back on the show ever again, so it doesn't matter. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hey, Fox News Alert, we're just learning that a federal judge has issued a gag order in the case involving former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort and his business associate Rick Gates. They are charged in the ongoing Russia probe by special counsel Robert Mueller. The judge's two-page order keeps the defendants, the potential witnesses, and any lawyers from any statements to the media or public which could prejudice the case. More on that ahead. Fox News Alert, it has been the talk of Washington and really the entire country, and now we might hear a little less talk. A federal judge has issued a gag order restricting a lot of the public statements coming out of Paul Manafort and Rick Gates. Paul Manafort, of course, the former temporary chairman of President Trump's election campaign. Rick Davis also worked on the campaign. He is a Manafort associate, and they have been charged by special counsel Robert Mueller in conjunction with his Russia interference investigation. The judge doesn't want to hear any more from witnesses, potential witnesses, defense attorneys, or just about anybody else involved in this case. She has signed a gag order, which goes into effect immediately. And you can imagine if that gets violated, she's not going to be happy. So we will not be hearing much from anyone involved in this case, at least if they abide by that judge's gag order. We'll continue to keep you covered on that story.
So right now, President Trump is in China meeting with President Xi Jinping and urging pressure on Beijing to step up and rein in North Korea on its nuclear and ballistic missile programs. This as Trump sent a strong warning to Kim Jong-un last night during his address to the Korean National Assembly.
I hope I speak not only for our countries, but for all civilized nations when I say to the North, do not underestimate us and do not try us.
Michael O'Hanlon, Director of Foreign Policy Research for the Brookings Institution, joins us now. So we hear that the big ask is going to be to stop the flow of oil from China. I don't know if a lot of people know there's an 18-mile pipeline. Almost all of the crude oil that North Korea gets flows through that pipeline from China.
Well, nice to be with you. And also, as you know, there have been UN Security Council sanctions that have tried to restrict that flow. to maybe roughly 2/3 of what it had been. So that was the compromise that was reached back in September after North Korea's 6th and biggest nuclear test. And apparently the United States went into that UN deliberation wanting a complete cutoff of oil, as well as other things like textiles and remittances from North Korean laborers abroad. Some of that we did get the absolute terms we wanted, but on oil I think we got roughly a 1/3 reduction would be the expectation. So I don't know if President Trump is really hoping he can do better than the UN Security Council resolution would have demanded, or just trying to get China to comply with that resolution and not allow people to, you know, use illicit trucking activities and other things that might not be detectable through the pipeline to get oil in when it's not supposed to exceed a certain amount.
Do you think
As
he's
you know,
likely...
over the years, we've always tried to get China to do more of this. It's always been hard.
Yeah. Do you think they'll do more now?
Well, I think President Trump does have a potential strategy here. You know, it's hard to know where Donald Trump's tweets and just his, you know, temperament leave off and his actual strategizing begins. But the beauty of this situation is that, you know, no one can tell. And in other words, what I'm trying to say, people are a little scared of what President Trump might do next. And that may give him a little more leverage over the Chinese and ultimately the North Koreans than President Bush or Obama or Clinton was able to muster. But I think we also have to be realistic. The Chinese have spent a quarter century you know, sort of adjusting pressure on North Korea, never as much as we want, never enough to really force a deal. And so I think we're going to have to combine the attempt at pressure with a somewhat more realistic negotiating strategy. Those two things together might work.
I mean, no one has solved the problem yet. We've had, they've certainly been trying, but he's there now to put the pressure on. We'll see. We're out of time. I'm sorry about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, the markets have been hitting new records since President Trump was elected. We're live on Wall Street with what's happened over the last year. The Dow Jones down just about a couple of points right now.
Hit, I guess, close to 60 records on the stock market since November the 8th, that very big day. The stock market is at an all-time high. Unemployment is at its lowest level in almost 17 years.